Views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Are you ready?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Now broadcasting live from the After Hours AM studio, Joel Sturgis and Eric Olsen.
Welcome to this edition of After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, and right along with me,
Eric Olsen.
And, hey, man, we got a great show on tap tonight. We have Dr. Robert Schoch coming on, and we're going to talk about ancient civilizations and us.
Very, very cool. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
It really is.
He's a geologist, and he's done all kinds of research and has come up with some very controversial conclusions about the ages of civilizations and who built some of the most iconic archaeological works on Earth.
Yeah, well, that'll be cool. You know, we'll kind of talk to him. You know, how old is that darn stinking Sphinx after all?
Exactly.
You know, stuff like that. So it'll be cool to talk about those ancient cultures. I'm also curious to believe if he thinks that, and I'm sure he doesn't, but I'm going to throw it at him anyway, you know me, of whether there's an ancient alien component.
I didn't see it in any of his research.
No, we're going to put him on the mat, man.
I would very much like to
put
hear
him
that.
on the mat and see what he has to say. Where does he weigh in on the whole ancient aliens thing? And that, because, of course, you know, there's a lot of people. In fact, we had Eric Von Doniken on the show, well, about 6-8 months ago.
The originator.
That's right, that wrote the Chariots of the Gods. So it'd be kind of cool to get his take, being someone that has studied extensively ancient civilization, whether he believes that maybe UFOs had something or aliens had something to do with the creation of our civilization. But we will take it from there, and we'll see what he has to say. He might say, you guys are crazy. What the hell are you even talking? Aliens? What are you talking about, aliens? He might even say that, but we will find out. And something funny this afternoon happened. I talk to the fans a lot on Facebook. You know, I mean, people listen to this show, they love the show, and they love what we're doing. And I'll throw out just questions, random questions, kind of like a poll question. And I threw one of them out today, and I asked this very simple question, two of them really, and we'll start with the first one. Who's the greatest rock band of all time? You know, there are as many answers as there are any grains of sand on the beach, man. It was nuts. Wow, you know, what do you consider now, Eric, to be a good rock band or the greatest ever? What criteria must this band, because you are a musician and you actually wrote the book, The Record Producer's Encyclopedia. What?
Beyond that, Joel, funny you should bring up this topic. Do you know what my single most read article of all time. I'm talking like 1 million views on one article. Do you know what it is?
I would say it's your love of scrapbooking. What?
That was a biggie, but bigger still was the 10 greatest rock bands of all time.
Well, then I am talking to the right man. Then I am talking to the right guy.
Imagine you are.
So now, a lot of people, a lot of our fans, and God bless you, had some obscure bands that really, I don't think that there would be considered quote unquote, and a lot of them aren't obscure. Like the Monkees, not obscure, but they're not a rock band. Yeah,
they're not a rock band because they were a studio creation.
Exactly. And so barring
They
a
were
studio
created.
creation, I'm talking about the guys that go on stage with the thunderous drums, that playing their own instruments, writing their own songs, that fought their way to the top. That's the kind of rock bands I'm talking. I'm not talking about ones that were made in a record studio going, if we just throw these guys together, maybe we'll get some playing Tiger Beat.
Yes, I know what you mean. My definition is probably a little broader than yours.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about a rock band, I'm casting a pretty wide net.
Yeah. Okay.
I still want there to be a rock and roll element to them, but I'm willing to interpret that.
Well, let me qualify something first
pretty
right away,
broadly.
because one of the big arguments is the Beatles. Are they a rock band or a pop band?
Oh, of course they're a rock band.
But they did a
And
lot
a
of
pop
pop
band.
stuff.
Yeah, but what's pop? Pop really just means it's melodic.
True.
They are
true.
absolutely, without question, a rock and roll band. Did they do other kinds of material besides what we would strictly call rock and roll? Sure, yes, they did.
And how about
But
the Beach Boys?
Absolutely no question.
How
that
about
they
the
were
Beach
rock and roll.
Boys? Would you call them rock and roll or the Pet Sound?
They are certainly also a rock and roll band.
All right, because that was curious because there was a lot of banter back and forth whether the Beatles were a rock band or were they more of a pop band with a rock edge. So,
The definition of pop for our purposes here, I would put pop not so much with the sound as how the music is made. So, in other words, when you were disqualifying the Monkees for being a studio creation, which they were, absolutely, no question. They were put together by songwriters and producers, and they really did sing, and eventually they did play live, at least some.
Yeah.
And they played instruments. The only one I think who ever recorded actually with them, though, was Mike Nesmith, who was a very good guitar player. I think he's the only one who actually played on the recordings. Until later, they made a big stink, and they made an album where they played the instruments later in their career, and it kind of showed, I have to admit.
Well,
Beach Boys, absolutely. They're a real band, rock and roll band. Is there a pop element? Of course there is.
Now, give me your rundown of the top 10 or 5, top 10 in your mind, greatest rock bands to ever grace the stage.
Yes, and remember, I'm interpreting it a little bit broader maybe than you are, okay?
All right.
Number 1, the Beatles. Number 2, Rolling Stones. Number 3, U2. Number 4, Grateful Dead. Number 5, Velvet Underground. Number 6, Led Zeppelin. Number 7, The Ramones. Number 8, Pink Floyd. Number 9, Bob Marley and the Wailers. And number 10, Sly and the Family Stone.
Okay, now this is according to our listeners. This is their own top 10 list that I compiled by reading the various submissions to the question. Number 10, The Who. Number 9, Guns N' Roses. Number 8, Nirvana. Number 7, The Rolling Stones. Number 6, AC/DC. Number 5, Metallica. Number 4, Queen. Number 3, Pink Floyd. Number 2, The Beatles. And number 1, oh, sorry, I tried to do drum roll. I failed miserably. Led Zeppelin. That is their top 10. Now,
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
But what
very, very specifically kind of geared
towards heavy,
hard.
Yes, exactly. Now, I do not believe
that is a very readers or listeners and all the above. That is a very fine hard rock list.
Well, I don't really. I would not put, as great as they were, I wouldn't put Guns N' Roses in that category, personally. I wouldn't put Nirvana in the top 10. I mean, although they did change music, they brought the grunge sound from Seattle, I get it, but I don't think I would have put them there in that top 10, in my mind anyway, at least not in that top 10 list. Maybe in other top 10 lists, sure, but not this one. Now, Metallica, that kind of made me go, Metallica? Yes, no, maybe.
If we're going to go metal, which certainly that's a reasonable category in and of itself, but if we're gonna include the very best of metal in our hard rock category, I would certainly put Black Sabbath ahead.
Oh yeah, they didn't even make the list. I mean, Tony Iommi,
for sure.
Who's the guitarist? Tony Iommi. What was his
Iommi.
name? Yeah, there it is.
Iommi.
The dude, lost his fingers. And had he not lost his fingers, they wouldn't have had such a dark sound.
Very correct.
He had to tone it.
He had an accident. A portion of fingers were cut off.
Yep. And he had to detune or tune way down.
You're right.
And it really gave that
low string down to D.
Yeah, and gave it that real deep, just sinister riffs is what it did. And my God, there was more.
Super fuzzy.
Yes, loved it, and it worked great.
Me too. I love
very good stuff. But and actually, to be honest with you, there was a bigger controversy today than the number one rock bands. I didn't believe this. I couldn't. I was shocked when I also threw out who's the best country artist of all time. Whoa, man! And hijinks ensued. And barring the new stuff where it's really pop music with a steel guitar, let's just be honest. I'm not talking about your Luke Bryans or your Taylor Swifts. I'm talking about down-rooting country, real country, the old stuff. I'm not talking about this new wave of poppy Florida Georgia Line stuff, which hey, if you love them, and God bless you. But I don't believe they have any room to be in that category as being the greatest.
Well, certainly
country
not yet.
artist.
Anyway,
exactly.
They haven't been around long enough.
Well, exactly that, and that music just rubs me the wrong way, man.
Me too, but we can take a more diplomatic door by saying, hey, they haven't been around long enough. I mean, if you look at my rock list, I mean, there's no one who began. Let's see. The most recent band is U2, and they began in like 1980.
Well,
so,
that kind of
my list is old, man.
Well, I really don't think U2 should be on the list. Personally, you
are absolutely welcome to feel that.
Well, no, because there was. I mean, Elvis didn't even make the list.
No, these are bands.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I would have thought for sure that the band didn't even make the list.
I love the band, but you know, I was trying. What I was really, and I explained this in the article at great length. I was really trying to give who or which band was the very best and the very most important from a whole bunch of different subcategories. So, for example, I only included 2 British invasion bands. I certainly could have included The Who. I love The Who. But I figured, all right, there's already 2, and they're the top 2, the Beatles and the Stones, as far as British invasion. Well, and Pink Floyd, for that matter, although they're not exactly British invasion, but they're certainly that era.
Yeah.
And so, so that's why The Who was left out, for example.
Well,
and, U2 represents a certain kind of sound, a certain approach. They're one of the very, very, very few bands that sort of straddled various subcategories. They're arena rock, they're classic rock, they're new wave, they're alternative. They're a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So they're the band that represents basically, the last 35 years. They're the only one in there, only new one.
Yeah, well, very true. And I know that country is not exactly in your wheelhouse, so to speak. I mean, would you call yourself a country music connoisseur?
I don't know about connoisseur, but I am absolutely a popular music historian. So yeah, I know a lot about country, and as I've said many times on the show when we've talked about it, the very best country, which to me is a pretty small percentage, but that is some of the greatest music ever recorded. There's just a kind of a high percentage of country that just sounds kind of dumb and redundant to me. That's all.
Well, I'm totally with you. I'm totally down with you.
But there is country I absolutely love, and I know quite a bit about the history of it. Just again from being a popular music historian.
Well, okay. Now, who would be if you had to make a list off the top of your head, let's just say top 10 country artists of your all time?
Oh,
what
boy.
would you say?
That wouldn't be easy for me to just sit there and pull 10 out of the air. I would, and it depends how country they have to be. I mean, are we including country rock?
We're including basically. I guess we have to go there. Country rock is just an offshoot of country, much like Pink Floyd's stuff was an offshoot of rock and roll because they're more psychedelic rock than they were flat out rock.
Right.
You know.
All right. Let's see. Let me give mine. Let me see. Well, I would certainly include, a lot of the obvious ones.
Sure.
Obviously, probably number one would be Hank Williams, just because he was such a great songwriter.
Yep.
He was such a visionary. He was so popular. Kind of everything he needed to be. So, Johnny Cash, of course, Willie Nelson, absolutely. I really love Dolly Parton. She's pretty pop, but I love a lot of Dolly Parton.
Yeah, she did some really good stuff.
I love Merle Haggard. I love Loretta Lynn.
Turned 21 in prison, doing life without parole.
Let's see. I love Patsy Cline,
Uh-huh.
who was very classic, sophisticated country singer.
Sure.
Let's see. I love a lot actually of the Western swing bands. You don't hear so much about them anymore because it's
How about the Conway Twitty?
I like Conway Twitty a lot. I probably like him actually better in his earliest rockabilly days, even better than his country days.
Now, was Kenny Rogers, was he a rocker before he was a country artist?
He was.
Because
I
was corrected.
He was a psychedelic.
Really? See, I was schooled by one of our listeners that is a big-time music historian like you are. And I guess he was a rocker before he came to country, and he was part of. Oh, geez, it's gonna escape me now. But what was his rock band? He told it to me too, and it's totally. I'm blanking out on it.
Kenny Rogers and the Fifth Edition?
Yes. Yep. That sounds right. And I had no idea he was a psychedelic rocker before he came to country. I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, in fact, his brother was I'm trying to think what his name is. I think it's Leland Rogers. He was kind of the biggest producer of all those 60s Texas psychedelic bands.
Really? I did not know that. That's very cool. Okay, here's our listeners' top 10.
The first edition.
Okay.
I was thinking of the Fifth Dimension for a moment. I knew that wasn't right. First edition, yeah. And they were very psychedelic. I remember seeing him. He was wearing his fringe, and he had a hat on. He had long hair. I thought he was cool. He's got a great voice.
Yeah, did he sing that song that goes, I had to check what my condition is? I had to
that's
check.
exactly
that's
it.
what it was, condition. Yes, I had to go back. I kind of YouTubed it. Oh, my God, he's right. He was a rocker way back then. You go, Mr. Kenny Rogers. But here is our listeners' top 10 list. Of course, it's unscientific. This is just me counting what people said. So if you do take issue with it, you are free to do so. This is just, like I said, I counted them in my head quick, boo, 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 who got the most, and put it in order for you folks. Number 10, according to our listeners, is Patsy Cline. She takes the number 10 spot. Number 9, Garth Brooks. Number 8, Alan Jackson. Number 7, Willie Nelson. Number 6, Waylon Jennings. Number 5, George Jones. Number 4, The Hag, Merle Haggard. Number 3, Hank Williams. Number 2, George Strait. And number 1 of all time, according to our listeners, Johnny Cash.
Well, that list is not far off from mine.
No, it really isn't.
Not at all.
It's right
so
there.
That's
with
pretty
it.
good.
Yeah, well, I always liked Johnny Cash. I always liked Johnny Cash stuff.
Me too. And he's another one covered an amazing range of musical styles, but he kind of brought them all under his own wing, and he made them his own.
Well, and like when we had Matt Swain on recently, we talked about the ghosts of country music. Country music and rock and roll are not that far apart because remember Sun Records with Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, really that's kind of the infancy of the modern rock sound.
Oh, absolutely. Rockabilly, the 50s. I mean,
yeah.
As we've talked about, rock and roll was a actually conscious blend in the case of Chuck Berry. I mean, he flat out said it. He said, "I'm blending country and western rhythms and some of the on his guitar anyway, playing techniques with R&B sensibility, and blues. So it's kind of a fast blues is really what it comes down to, and there's your rock and roll.
Yeah, it was kind of it was made by Chuck Berry though. The reason why I brought it up is because we lost him recently. And I was thinking, he was such an icon of music all the way around. And to lose an icon like that, it's like losing a Bowie or a Prince. But Chuck Berry was actually maybe the most influential of all the ones that we've lost.
Of all time. I would say Elvis certainly had a bigger impact. Mm-hmm. The Beatles certainly had a bigger impact. But I don't think there's anyone more influential and who has directed the course of rock and roll. No one more than Chuck Berry.
Well, if you see a rocker doing the duck walk, that's Chuck Berry.
Well, just all of the pretty much every classic rock and roll riff, he either invented or put his stamp on.
Well, it was interesting.
He's the classic original rock and roll guitarist.
I read an article of Pete Townsend, and Pete Townsend said, had it not been for Chuck Berry, there'd be no Pete Townsend.
Oh, and there would certainly be no Keith Richards. There would be, on and on and on.
Yeah, because he really...
There would be no British invasion.
Yeah, he drew heavily upon, like the windmill move he did, was inspired by Chuck Berry and his antics on stage.
Of course.
All these different artists were giving their opinion on the Rolling Stone website, and it's just amazing how many of them look to him. And I would have thought most of them would have said, well, B.B. King, because we did lose him as well. But you didn't hear the outcry like you did for Chuck Berry.
No, well, I mean, B.B. King was they were both old, so that's part of it. I mean, Chuck Berry's 90, so it's not like it was a shock. It's not like his life was cut short by any means. But I think there was simply a recognition of how incredibly important and influential he was. I think, honestly, to be honest, if he would have died like 20 years earlier, maybe at 70, there would have been an even bigger outpouring because simply – a lot of people alive today just aren't directly aware of what was going on in the 50s and in the early 60s. Mm-hmm. They just weren't there. I mean, I was barely there. So in other words, anyone who's under 60, didn't really experience Chuck Berry firsthand in the 50s or even early 60s. So the bottom line is you're kind of getting him secondhand through all these other great artists, whereas some of these others who've died recently, Bowie and Prince and whatnot, they're much more in in our age range. They were in the range that we were fans in, and we grew up with them. So I think that's the big difference. That's why you're hearing so much more from some of the older, rock and rollers, rock stars, 60s, 70s people, because they know they were there and they were directly influenced. But I don't think there's anyone on earth who was more influenced than Keith Richards. So without him, you do not have the Rolling Stones.
And we don't have to worry about Keith dying. We don't have to worry about that. He's immortal. Every time a celebrity dies, he experiences a quicken.
Is that how it happens?
That's what happens.
I think he's got, he's got something in his veins, man. There's something running. I don't know, it's antifreeze, or he's already got the mummy preservative in there.
I'm not sure.
But he does not seem to be.
And I'm kind of surprised that Bob Dylan didn't make the country list, because he was also country.
Well, he was, but it's kind of like someone like Neil Young, where they have gone through and like Elvis, of course, where they go through so many different styles, or Johnny Cash for that matter.
Yeah.
And they do make them their own, but you kind of have to decide, where do you ultimately place Bob Dylan? Is Bob Dylan ultimately a rock and roller? Is he a folk singer? Is he a poet? Was he a country and western? Yeah, I mean, he had a couple, 2, 3 just outstanding country or country-influenced albums. Bob Dylan did, absolutely, in the 60s that I love. That's probably my favorite phase of his. Some of my favorite Dylan songs
I would
are
agree.
in that country mode.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And then when he went from acoustic to electric, man, it was a big coup.
Oh, it was a big deal.
It was a huge deal. And then a lot of our listeners are saying, don't forget the Highwaymen. That was an act. That was like a super group coming together, the Highwaymen.
Yeah, right.
That was Waylon Jennings. That was
Johnny
Cash. Chris Christopherson, I do believe, was in there. Willie Nelson. So that was more like a super group coming in.
Yeah, it was.
It wasn't necessarily like a band that was together through the good times and bad. It was a super group. They were great. Don't get me wrong. They were great in what they did, and they wrote some really, really cool songs. Like the Highwaymen did, and Roy Orbison, wasn't he one, or is he a Wilbury?
He was a Wilbury.
Okay.
Have you heard of the $1 Million Quartet?
No, I have not. Who is the $1 Million Quartet?
All right. There was a recording session, and it was in Memphis, naturally, because it was Sun Records. The greatest of all Sun recording artists recorded together.
Now,
it was
that
just
would
kind
be
of a
cool.
one-off fun thing. Check this list. Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash.
Wow.
The $1 Million.
Man, that would have been something to hear.
It certainly would have.
That would have been great to be a fly on that wall. A lot of people don't talk about Carl Perkins, though. In the list. I don't know why.
Fantastic.
Because, my God, he was
amazing guitarist.
He was just
played
something.
with, he played with Johnny Cash for decades.
Yeah.
Besides being a solo artist. But yeah, he, blue suede shoes. That's Carl Perkins.
Yep. Yes, I cannot forget Charlie Pride should be in there as well. You're right.
Love Charlie Pride.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for IMing me that yes, Charlie Pride was very influential because it was...
and just a great voice.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing voice.
Beyond the race thing, because he did blaze a trail.
He certainly did.
Before that, you didn't see a lot of African Americans singing country music.
They have been few and far between. There's always been a few hanging around, but he is certainly the biggest star by far.
Yep. And Charlie Daniels, I have to give a tip of the nod. But yeah, these are all great artists. Either way, if you agree with the list, don't agree with the list, I think they're all great. All mentioned, everyone's list.
I'm very impressed, honestly, by all the lists put forth. The country list I thought was quite good from the listeners, and the hard rock list was very good. But we do have to say, every one of those bands is a hard rock band.
They are. Every single one of them, except for maybe Queen.
Oh, even they were. Rock band.
Well, they were a rock band, but they were more of an arena band.
They did their share of what I would call metal.
Yeah,
they did
know.
Hard stuff.
They did do a lot of hard stuff. You know what? Bohemian Rhapsody, though, I wouldn't
Well,
call
that
it
wouldn't
hard.
be one of the ones that I
No,
would
no, because that's the only thing I ever think of. Whenever anyone says Queen, I think of the where they're
I
singing.
put that to the back of the list. That's about my least favorite song they ever did.
Yeah, because I mean that's what they're known for, though. Whenever you hear anyone talk about Bohemian Rhapsody, is all you ever hear. You don't hear about Fat Bottom Girls or all the other great. Or it's
you want to hear something that rocks the rectum? Check out Stone Cold Crazy. That
actually
about
is. You're
as
right.
hard as it gets.
You are right. I do have to admit that was about as hard as it gets. We got to get out of here. Go to break. When we come back, we're going to give you what you guys want, your weekly dose of paranormal. That's right, America's Most Haunted Headlines coming right at you right after this. Hey, you listen to After Hours AM, and if you're listening to us via podcast, make sure you like us, follow us, review us, tell your friends about us, tell grandma about us, and keep listening.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If pop culture is to be believed, roughly 40% of all people are actually vampires, or dating one. Well, undead or not, you can always save on a clean, comfortable room at Motel 6, even if you sleep during the day because direct sunlight turns you into a pile of sparkly coffee grounds. Speaking of which, we have free coffee every morning. You day sleepers may want to go for the decaf. I'm Tom Bodette, and we'll leave the light on for you. Book online at motel6.com.
Anavar Media LCC is a dedicated team of professionals committed to helping business development scale and protect their websites, mobile applications, enterprise software solutions in the Northeast Ohio area. Locally owned since 2012, our client-centered values truly sets Anavar apart. Contact us today to learn how you can get 25% off your first project. Call them at 234-380-4852. Again, that's 234-380-4852, or visit them at www.anavar.com. Again, that's www.anavar.com.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the wacky waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the wacky waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
Hey everybody, this is Joel Sturgis, and did you know that After Hours AM and America's Most Haunted have a great new website out there? You're going to want to visit America's-most-haunted.com. There you can get all the new content from all the writers for America's Most Haunted, as well as the great haunted headlines everybody loves each and every week, as well as catch After Hours AM live right there, along with podcasts, past shows, and get to know your hosts, as well as contact us all in one stop. You're going to love it. You're not going to want to go anywhere else. So come to America's-most-haunted.com today. You're listening to After Hours AM. Do you have a question for the guests or even the host? That's really easy. Go ahead and email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Are you feeling like picking up the phone and being part of the show? Call us at 612-326-6874, 612-326-6874. Come be part of the madness.
Rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Yes, she will, precious. She will get the hose.
keep it up, let the rumors spread. Don't you try to catch my blind.
And welcome back to After Hours AM. One thing we did leave out of that list is elliptical. They didn't make that list, Eric.
Darn it!
And Zombie Ghost Train didn't make it, and that was who our bumper music was.
Oh,
not even them, but yeah, they didn't make the list either. But anyhow, we got your America's Most Haunted headlines coming right at you. And wow, I'm looking already over here at Twitter. So if you're not on Twitter, go to Twitter and search out AM Haunted. And come along with us. Go on this journey, this pictorial journey, because there's a lot of pictures to look at.
It's a magical mystery tour.
It really is. Yeah, come on, join us. And again, that's Twitter, AM Haunted. Come join the rest of you guys, all 454,000. Yeah, 454,000. Oh, my Lord. I didn't realize there's that many followers. Holy crap, man.
Yeah,
wow.
we're gonna all
almost makes me nervous now.
We're going to have a party.
We are. Imagine how big that party would be.
I would be a hell of a party.
Bring your own booze.
We're going to start our own city, the America's Most Haunted City.
A cult. I always want to start a cult.
Everyone needs to move in there, all 454,000.
I've always wanted to start a cult.
I know. You mentioned
I know, but every time I start up, I realize how expensive robes and haircuts are, and that's what stops me. So I just don't have the capital.
But don't you shave?
I do. I have a shaved head, so I want, even if you go down to Great Clips, they still want $12 to do that.
Really?
Yes, so there's no winning. I mean, if only
let me think. I've had my last professional haircut was probably 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah? Do you do it yourself? Are you like a self-cutter?
Oh,
okay. Yeah, I just shaved the old head. I bick it, man. I mean, like, bick it, because I'm bald otherwise anyway, so why fight Mother Nature?
I know what you mean. All right, so here we go. All right, we love, besides obviously the clearly paranormal, we love weird, freaky space stuff because space rules.
It does rule. It's always above us.
NASA has funded 22 just nutty, it sounds like to me, really out there futuristic concepts that could lead to breakthroughs in space exploration. The number one, the one that everyone's mentioning is they have funded a study into bioengineering microbes to be placed on Mars. Nothing could go wrong there.
What? So they want to implant them with mutants?
They want to put microbes, the feasibility of putting microbes on Mars, which would then make the soil much more amenable to planting. Because right now they think it's sterile, right?
Yeah.
So there's nothing there. So that's why, for example, in The Martian, when he wanted to grow the potatoes, why he had to fertilize it with his own feces, as it were.
His own outhouse.
Because there's no biomes, I believe they're called, currently in the Martian soil.
They want to farm out Mars.
Yes, basically.
Okay.
They want to prepare Mars for farming.
To get so it can grow corn at affordable prices.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
All the above.
Gotcha.
All right, so that's that one.
You know what's colonized is going to be a
21
Walmart.
other projects. Yes, go ahead.
One of them is probably getting a Walmart up there. I'm sure of it. It seems to be everywhere else.
Well, I mean, it's astonishing there's not one on the moon.
No, you'd be surprised.
Moon's right. I mean, you could just reach your arm out and touch the moon.
Yeah, exactly. It's made of cheese.
How could there not be a Walmart there?
You would think there'd be a Walmart there. At least a small one.
Maybe there's not enough customers yet.
That could be the case, too.
All right, our bros at Midnight Syndicate, the haunted house band, who have now been around for 20 years, which is kind of hard to believe.
That is crazy.
And they have a 20th anniversary commemorative coin. And if you go to their website, just click through from the America's Most Haunted Twitter feed. If you go to their website, if you buy, all you got to buy is $10 worth of merchandise. So just pick up a CD, get a T-shirt, whatever. You get one free. You get a free commemorative coin.
That is great. You know, that I want one of those. So I just might have to go to the website and pick up one of the CDs I don't have. That is really cool, and they need your love and help. Come on, they're great guys. 20 years of doing this, wow, that's something.
And don't forget, after a year off, they will be performing live all through the Halloween season at Cedar Point. That's going to be fantastic.
That is going to be awesome, especially, the way they do their music is not what you would think.
No, I mean, it's their recordings are all very heavily produced, and there's a lot of synths and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But no, they play live. It's a real band. There's real vocals. They bring in some singers. It's a whole band. It's an amazing thing, and I can't wait to see what they put together as far as the production aspects and the theatrical aspects for this year's show, because they've said it's going to be really quite different and a step up from even the show of 2 years ago, which was amazing. All right, let's move along now. This is firmly in the paranormal. Gassy Afterlife.
Gassy Afterlife. It sounds like something after burrito night.
Check it out. All right, so we're looking at this testimonial from a woman. I always hoped my Bobby would contact me from the other side to let me know that he was okay, but I never expected him to do it like this. You see, I think my Bobby's spirit is somehow trapped inside me, and he's desperate to get out. This is a little personal, so I'll try to put it as politely as possible. I suffer from terrible wind, and when I release it, it's always such a relief. The other week, I was in a toilet cubicle at John Lewis's. I don't know, is that a restaurant or something?
I'm not sure what that is.
I'm not either. At John Lewis's, making myself comfortable when I released some wind, and I swear I heard the words, "Help me."
Oh, come on. Could have been the guy or the gal in the next stall. Help me. Help me.
Help me. In my Bobby's slightly muffled
Are you
voice.
kidding me?
Is that hysterical or what?
So this lady goes to the bathroom and breaks wind, and she hears "help me." My Lord, under the right circumstances, I want to say that with the next guy in the stall next to me. Are you kidding me? Yeah. He's contacting me through my flatulence.
Oh, goodness. So, honestly, I'm not exactly sure if that's legit or not. I'd like to think it is.
Well, I don't know. I feel bad for Bobby now.
Bobby,
he's been relegated to being
flatulent.
Yeah, he's relegated to being as the kids say, a fart.
I guess the kids do say that.
They do, don't they? Especially my little one, 3-year-old. Oh, she loves that. She goes nuts for that stuff. Man, she loves the toilet humor. Oh, my Lord.
You know what? My older two, who are, well into adulthood now.
Yeah.
But they called such things when they were little poopy burps.
Poopy burps. Well, that makes sense, I guess. That's better than saying, "Hey, I farted."
I love poopy burps.
That's not too bad.
Descriptive, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. But, like your children when they were small, my 3-year-old just thinks it's the funniest thing ever. Just especially if there's an audience.
And my wife thinks it's the funniest thing ever.
Especially if there's an audience when somebody is there and she can break wind. Oh, my God, it's a full-blown panic attack of laughter out of her.
She's 3.
She is 3.
I don't know what my wife's excuse. She's 47.
Well, I'm not even going to say anything. You got me on that one. Well, let's go to the next story.
Oh, this one. This is amazing. It's an article. It's from The Conversation, which is a really cool British publication. And they address very interesting and serious topics kind of across the board and go into some depth usually. And this one's about, can we ever find the DNA of Jesus? And there is a scientist who is very seriously pursuing this. And there's 2 separate potential, they think, sources of the DNA of Jesus.
Well, one would have to be the shroud, right? I don't mean to cut you off, but that's got to be the shroud.
The shroud is one, absolutely. Shroud of Turin, absolutely. But the other one, which I wouldn't have thought of, it is it's from the James ossuary, and James was Jesus's brother. So think about that.
Yeah.
It's his brother,
Yeah.
so it would be the DNA. Would be very similar. So that's what basically it's about. So it's a guy it's a scientist, and he's trying to, geneticist and whatnot, and he is tracking down. They're saying it's now seems plausible. We don't know if it will happen or not, but that they will actually be able to track down the actual DNA of Jesus.
That is cool, because
it's astonishing.
A lot of people have said there's no hard evidence that he existed.
They have. Though you're hearing it a lot less nowadays than you did even, say, 20 years ago, because they have made quite a few discoveries which do appear to support his physical existence. Absolutely. Historical existence.
Yeah, years ago, they used to say the name Jesus was as common as the name Mike is today.
Yeah, it was fairly common.
So it was extremely common. So I'm glad that there's strides because, like I've said many times in the show, I'm a believer, man. I'm a Christian. I'm a good Lutheran boy. And
Me too.
I just want to, I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. And hopefully we can keep moving forward with more breakthroughs.
It would be amazing. It really would. The confluence of science and faith. That's a pretty amazing thing. All right, moving along. You got to see this picture, or it's kind of pointless. So once again, my friends, go to twitter.com. Even if you don't already belong, you can still go check it out. And go to the @AMHaunted. So really, it's just twitter.com/AMHaunted. They think they may have the very first actual image of dark matter. That would be
we're on that network.
Enormous.
We're on that network, Matt. You can just go to darkmatter.com. Come on, we're on that radio network. So don't worry about it. There it is. But yes, I know what you're talking about. Actual, real, physical dark matter in space.
Yes.
That was thought not to exist for years. So now they're actually coming closer.
There's been no evidence. That's been the problem. It's been theorized for years, for decades, theorized. But they haven't been able, till now, to come up with any actual physical evidence. That's part of what all this is going on with the particle accelerators, the smashing of atoms, and also the huge tub of heavy water that is trying to collect material, including neutrinos, and that has some implications for dark matter as well. But anyway, this first image, which is really freaky looking, it looks like kind of a pair of amoebas.
It does. I thought a pair of eyes looking at us.
Or eyes,
now, is
mask.
there any chance in the laboratory they can make dark matter?
That would be down the road, definitely.
Okay, because I know they're smashing atoms and making a black hole.
Right, and that is supposed to show, it is possible that there will be evidence that comes from the smashing of subatomic particles.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
So
again,
that is a fine thing. It's a cool picture. Just from a picture standpoint, you guys should check it out.
And if you, go to Twitter, AM Haunted, search it out. Join us, love us, better yet, follow us.
Follow us. And I will follow you as long as you have an actual Twitter account. I follow everyone who follows me that's not, Nazi porn.
Then there's that. The Nazi porn. You don't want
I mean, unless it's something really outlandish, I am happy to follow you back. My friends! All right, moving along. This really caused me, for some reason, just kind of hit me. There's still a tribute, and all it says, there's just one plaque. It's a ancient stone tribute with a cross on top. It's mostly a pyramid, basically, of stones with a cross on top. And this is all it says. Maggie Wall burnt here 1657 as a witch.
That's it? That's all it says? There's no who she was?
Scotland. It's in Scotland.
Wow. Man. It must have been tough being a witch back in those days.
Boy, getting burned all the damn time.
All the time.
Everywhere you go,
everywhere.
They light you on fire.
Yeah, everywhere you want to go, there's always a stake, and they want to burn you at it. But interesting. 1657. Let's see. Maggie Wall burnt here. Wow, that is. Now, is there any reason in the article that I haven't looked at yet why that's so significant?
Well, I'm not
the person.
Sure.
That was the
Exactly.
person
Well,
significant.
what's really interesting is they can't find any record of a woman named Maggie Wall being tried as a witch.
Okay, that would make it very interesting then, because if they can't find a record of it and there's a memorial.
So in a sense, it's possible, since they don't really know, what's up with it. It's possible that the memorial was set up as a tribute to all people, women mostly, people burnt as witches. And check this out. In Scotland, over only a 200-year period, from the 1500 to the 1700s, 1,500 people were killed.
Damn.
After being accused of being witches. 1,500.
It must not have taken much to be accused of a witch and die. Hey, that guy's a witch, or that lady's a witch over there. Oh, let's get her. And that's basically it.
But just the memorial itself, there's something about it that just really kind of strikes a chord with me. It's 20 feet high. It's made of stones piled up, and then at the top there is a cross. It's about 20 feet high, and it's near the small village of Dunning, Scotland. So interestingly, it may be kind of like the Unknown Soldier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's against or it's commemorating all of those who were burned.
Yeah. Wow.
In a very
stuff.
dark time.
Extremely dark. So you have to go to AM Haunt to check it out. Make sure you look at that. That is actually quite interesting. I'm going to read that article after the show because it's kind of wow. You know, can you imagine
it's
all
kind
those
of
people?
Spooky, yeah.
Yeah, all those people dying really for no good reason other than someone.
Well, there weren't that many people in Scotland.
No, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't like
1,500 in only 200 years.
Like 30% of the population gone.
Well, a significant portion. All right. So speaking of something kind of similar, in Philadelphia, in New York too, for that matter, they keep running into these problems doing excavation work because they keep finding old forgotten cemeteries. They keep finding a bunch of bones, and then they got to call in archaeologists to try to figure out, who they are, what era they're from, and what to do.
Damn.
So it just happened again. I mean, you can't drop a shovel in Philadelphia without disturbing the dead.
Yeah, you would think that they'd have a better record of, where the cemeteries are.
The problem is they got moved around. They've been moved 2 or 3 different times.
Gotcha.
And then the records get lost of where they ended up.
For city expansion, I suppose, they'd move the cemeteries.
Exactly.
Yeah, yep. Makes sense. It's really kind of cool and scary all at the same time.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want to be that guy.
We have to do our commemorative... terrifying Easter bunny.
Oh my God, that's so ugly.
Look at that thing.
Look at that
those
kid.
Poor little babies. Look at those kids.
That kid's
They're
blowing
terrified.
a gasket. Especially that little boy, I'm assuming.
Look at the teeth.
Yeah, he
They're
is
burying their teeth in horror.
Blowing gaskets being held by this ugly Easter bunny. That's a psychotic bunny if I ever saw one. Wow.
It's that time of year when giant rabbits terrorize the young.
Were you ever afraid of the Easter bunny growing up?
Not that I remember, no.
No. When I was growing up, I was actually had a fear because, like this picture, there was a giant bunny that you could go see, I think, at the shopping mall. And that thing always freaked me out because it didn't have any emotion.
Of course.
It just kind of waved. That's all it did was waved.
It's the uncanny aspect.
It's just weird.
They're so
it's
big,
creepy.
and why don't their eyes move?
And the bunny always smelled like bourbon. I never could figure out why I always smelled like Jim Beam.
Or Mad Dog 2020.
Yeah, the cheapest. Whatever was on sale at the liquor store that day.
All right, well, we got time maybe for a couple more. So there's any number. If you go on the internet, oh my God, you can find all kinds of old-timey, and not necessarily even all that old, pictures with these poor kids just being terrorized by Easter bunnies. And I don't think the Easter Bunny meant to do it, but a lot of them are really
I look
creepy looking.
You know what? That Easter Bunny's taking great joy in that. You can look at his face; it looks satisfied,
and he's chuckling to himself.
Yes, good. Ha ha ha!
Another pair terrorized.
Yeah, got two more.
Oh, those poor little kids.
That's where those Easter eggs come from. They get so scared.
They pop them out. All right, so this weekend begins the NBA playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Who do you like?
Check out this guy. Well, I would normally, of course, say my Cavaliers, but my God, they look so awful.
Yeah.
Oh, terrible. They lost their last 4 games of the season. I mean, come on.
Okay. You know what? We don't have a basketball team. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, the Timberwolves. Okay. Yeah. That's who we have.
I don't think they made the playoffs.
No, they haven't made the playoffs like in 20 years. So
it's been a while.
I don't even watch them anymore. I don't even care. I couldn't tell you one Timberwolves player right now.
Well, they do have they got a couple of first, very successful first round picks
every year.
When they traded Kevin Love to the Cavs, they got the first pick, lottery pick.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they have some talent. It's just they're still real young. That's all.
Yeah. Well, shouldn't be that young. They were formed back in the 80s. Come on. Get
current
together.
Team is young.
Yeah, because we didn't have a team after the Lakers left. We didn't have anyone for a long time.
Oh, no. Yeah, you're right. Many years.
Yep. Okay, well, anyhow, I'm looking at this dude that's dribbling a basketball.
All right, so this guy,
he's got
clearly,
no skin.
He'd be a lottery pick if not for one thing missing.
A lack of skin.
Yeah. Guy has no skin.
No.
But he can dribble, man. He can take it to the hole.
He can't put a skin in the game.
No. But isn't that a weird picture?
That is a weird picture. That must be at that museum where they skin things.
All the bodies, yeah.
Yeah, and they put it out for exhibit. Can you imagine being that poor guy?
I want to be that guy.
Can you imagine your family selling your body to this joint? Like, Uncle Ron.
You can go be the NBA guy.
Yeah. Well, Uncle Ron didn't have a will, money, or any directive for us to do, but we can make a few bucks off him if we sell this joint.
Dribble that ball.
Yeah. Let's sell them the Smithsonian. I bet you they'll do something with them.
I find that to be a creepy picture. Speaking of creepy pictures, check out this GIF. This is from a roller coaster in Spain. And the guy is having the time of his life.
I like your caption.
Until he gets hit in the face by a bird.
Listen to Eric's caption. Dude gets bird douched in the face on roller coaster.
You got to keep it short on Twitter.
Bird douched.
He got bird douched. Look at him. I was trying to think. Okay, keep this brief.
I was at a wedding one time, and the bride.
And the guy got bird douched?
The bride got bird douched.
Oh, my God.
I was
what
sitting
happened?
there. It was an outdoor wedding, right? And here she's walking all proud, and next thing you know, a pigeon comes by, and it must have had a lot to eat that day because it was an ungodly amount of dew. And it but even made a sound when it hit her.
Splat.
Yeah. Right in the hair and the shoulder. It was not
good. Was that
good.
interpreted as some sort of
I was thinking to myself, maybe you should take that as an omen. Things to come.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
That would be horrible.
Poor woman.
Yes, very poor woman. Yes, I'll never forget it.
Poor roller coaster rider getting bird douched.
Yes, I feel worse for him.
Well, he could have been injured.
He really could have been. I mean, that's some flying douche coming at you.
The whole thing, and he's got birds and he's got feathers and blood. And
a bird could take down a Boeing 747.
He's picking feathers out of his teeth.
Ew. Oh. Yes, that is not fun, especially if you're motorcycle riding. That has happened to me it's happened to me on my four-wheeler as well. So.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah. Okay, we got time for one more. You got one more in the hopper, Eric.
All right, let's whip it on. All right, I thought this was actually very touching. There is a phone booth with an old rotary phone in it, and it's called the Wind Phone, and it was put there by survivors of the great Japanese disaster of now, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
First it was the earthquake, and then the tsunami, and then that took out the nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
Boy, that was a 1-2-3 punch.
It really was. And then of course Godzilla released a statement saying he had no involvement in that.
None whatsoever. he wanted to make it clear. So there's a phone there, this phone booth, and people go and they actually talk to their dearly departed loved ones on this phone.
Wow.
And it's supposedly, it sounds a little bit silly, but it's supposedly extremely
closure, man. Closure.
Therapeutic.
Yeah,
therapeutic.
closure, man. But we speaking of closure, we gotta close this out. We have to go to Fox News.
One more. Uranus has rings. Now you may go.
Okay, we can go now. Uranus has rings. Okay, we come back, Dr. Schoch. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this.
Fox News Radio, I'm Kathleen Maloney. The military's largest non-nuclear bomb rocked a remote area of Afghanistan near the Pakistan border. ISIS was the target, but the mission may have had another goal.
President Trump says he doesn't know whether or not the Pentagon's use of the so-called mother of all bombs in Afghanistan will send a message to North Korea, but he said that problem will take care of itself. Those comments coming after a GBU-43 bomb was dropped on ISIS forces in eastern Afghanistan today. The president calling the use of the 21,000-pound bomb another successful job on the part of the military.
Fox's Kevin Corke. Syrian President Assad strongly denies dropping chemical weapons on his own people in an interview with the French news agency AFP.
He says that videos of the dying and dead from sarin gas were faked. In that interview, he continued, our impression is that the West, mainly the United States, is hand in glove with the terrorists. That is what Assad calls anyone he doesn't like. They, meaning the United States, fabricated the whole story in order to have a pretext for the attack.
Fox's Leland Vittert. The family of the passenger who was dragged off a United Airlines flight in Chicago has viewed video of the incident.
We were horrified and shocked and sickened to learn what had happened to him and to see what had happened to him.
Crystal Dow Pepper is the daughter of Dr. David Dow, who plans to sue United. His attorneys say the doctor suffered a concussion, lost 2 front teeth, and will have to undergo reconstructive surgery for a broken nose. There are reports that 2 Secret Service agents have been fired over their handling of the fence jumper who made it just steps from the White House last month. President Trump was inside the White House at the time. Fox News Radio, fair and balanced. A Virginia man is convicted of murdering his 1-year-old son to collect on his $500,000 life insurance policy.
Joaquin Shadow Rams agreed to a non-jury trial. If prosecutors agreed to not seek the death penalty, he'll be sentenced to life in prison. He says he's innocent, that his son Prince died after a fever-induced seizure. This was during a court-ordered visitation in 2012. Prosecutors say the boy was suffocated or drowned. And Virginia's chief medical examiner ruled the cause of death to be undetermined. This man's ex-girlfriend was shot and killed in 2003. His mother died in 2008. That was ruled a suicide. He had life insurance out on them as well. This trial was only for the death of the son, and prosecutors weren't allowed to bring up the other deaths. Chris Foster, Fox News.
A private prison company has won an over $100 million federal contract to build the first immigrant detention center under the Trump administration. It'll be a 1,000-bed facility outside Houston, Texas. An environmental group is taking the government to court over President Trump's border wall.
The lawsuit wants DHS and the Border Patrol to create an environmental impact statement on border enforcement. They say the wall will have a negative impact on the environment. Center for Biological Diversity spokesman Randy Siraglio says they're especially concerned about animals that live and reproduce on both sides of the border.
It would be the end of jaguars and ocelots in the United States. It would end any chance of recovery for those species in the Southwest and in Texas.
They say the last environmental review on border security was in 2001. DHS would not comment on the lawsuit. Ray Bogan, Fox News.
Connecticut's governor will not seek a third term. Democrat Dan Malloy says he and his family are ready for another stage in their lives. Malloy gained national attention when he called for stronger gun laws after 20 first graders were killed in the Sandy Hook school shooting. I'm Kathleen Maloney, Fox News Radio.
Back, everybody. Welcome back to After Hours AM, the best in alternative talk radio. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me,
Eric Olsen.
And Eric, thank you for enlightening me on the rings around Uranus, by the way. Thank you. I wasn't sure that you wanted to talk about that, but I'm glad you did.
You are welcome.
Okay, we got a great guest tonight, and really a world scholar is what he is. But I'll let you fill everyone in on Dr. Schoch.
All right. In this mind-expanding edition of After Hours AM, America's Most Haunted Radio, we preview this year's Contact in the Desert UFO convention with geologist and ancient civilization visionary Dr. Robert Schoch. Contact in the Desert this year is May 19th to 21, and it's once again at Joshua Tree in the mystical desert of California. It's an epic weekend of exploration into extraterrestrial life, ancient aliens, human origins, secret space program, crop circles, UFO sightings, contact experiences, interstellar living, and the need to know, featuring dozens of top names in the field, including Dr. Robert Schoch. He stunned the world with his geological analysis of the Great Sphinx of Egypt in the early 1990s, demonstrating that the monument, as well as the walls of its enclosure, bear the scars of extreme water weathering and erosion. As Egypt has known hyper-arid climactic conditions for the past 5 millennia, Schoch concluded the monument traces its origins to an earlier epoch and a previously unidentified civilization, disrupting the orthodox view of the rise of civilization. Schoch's career and interests extend beyond strict geology and geophysics to anthropology, environmental science, and biology, paleontology. He's the author of numerous books and articles, both technical and popular, that have been translated into multiple languages, including Forgotten Civilization, the role of solar outbursts in the past and future. He has reached audiences around the world via television, radio, live presentation, and the internet. That's what it's called. And he was also involved with the Emmy-winning documentary, The Mystery of the Sphinx. At Contact in the Desert, Dr. Schoch will be talking on 3 topics. Ice Age civilizations and a solar cataclysm is number 1. Events that changed the world 12,000 years ago. Number 2, cosmic patterns, solar outbursts, and cycles of civilization. And last, but certainly not least, civilizations A, B, C, and beyond, exploring the evidence for sophisticated cultures in the deep past. Welcome to the program, Dr. Robert Schoch.
Well, thank you very much. What an introduction.
He is the best in the business. Eric really is the best in the business. Checks in the mail, Eric.
Yeah.
Checks in the mail.
I whip it on you.
What did you call me? Something visionary.
I made that up, and I stick by it. I think it absolutely describes you. I think it rules. You may use it free of charge. You are...
Yeah. What was it, Fully? What was it, visionary?
You are an ancient civilization visionary.
There you go.
Wow, that is pretty
like that.
Nice.
Isn't that, in fact, what you are, sir?
I guess that is what I am, an ancient civilization's visionary. Okay, well, that really starts the discussion because
it does.
Essentially my work, the core of my work, is looking at ancient civilizations, but not the ancient civilizations that most people think of, which I refer to as the latest round of civilizations, but really civilizations going back to a very, very much earlier period.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How far back would you say, Doctor?
Well, we don't really know how far back they go, but to put things in context, so a little education here for so that we're all up to speed. Conventional academics, conventional historians, and I am part of conventional academia in the sense that I'm a full-time faculty member at Boston University to this day. I've been doing that for over 30 years, and I received my PhD from Yale University. So I've been in academia all my life, literally. I never left school. I just went to school, went to college, went to graduate school, and now teach in a university. So from an academic point of view, the conventional story is that civilization arose about 4,000 to 3,000 years ago. So civilization is 5,000 to 6,000 years old. What I've established based on the evidence and have been talking about now for over 25 years, I hate to date myself that way, but over 25 years, beginning with my work on the Great Sphinx, is that civilization did not emerge simply 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, but in fact there is genuine evidence for what all the ancients always told us, which is that there was a cycle of civilization much, much earlier. I put the date of that, the end date of that, as 9700 BC, that this earlier cycle of civilization was decimated, was really went into demise, was, I don't want to say absolutely completely destroyed, but all but completely destroyed with the cataclysms, with the earth changes, with the natural catastrophes that brought the last ice age to a close 9700 BC, nearly 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So this is a radical departure from.
I was about to say that's a radical departure because it's looking at the information that you're putting them way further back than what they were thinking.
Exactly. I'm putting it further back by about 6,000 or so years, and so what we have is a situation where we now have evidence for civilization having arisen before the end of the last ice age, having become quite sophisticated, and this was absolutely decimated, thrown in a mighty setback with the catastrophes at the end of the last ice age. Civilization essentially went into decline. It went into a dark age, and that lasted for about 6,000 years, and it's in the 4,000 to 3,000 BC period that civilization does not originate, it simply re-emerges. It comes back, A very good analogy, because a lot of people can relate to this analogy, is in Western history you have Rome, and Rome reaches a real pinnacle in, say, the 1st century AD, but by the 5th century AD, 400 years later, it collapses, because of various things that are happening between the, quote, barbarians and disease and whatnot. We go into the Dark Ages, and it's 1,000 years before we re-emerge out of the Dark Ages and even start to get back to the level of civilization that we saw in classical ancient Rome. This is the same type of situation, but over a longer period and much more severe devastation, and much longer to come out of that, quote, dark age.
Do you think that there was a lost city of Atlantis? Because they're finding some astonishing things underneath the polar caps.
Yeah, there's all kinds of neat things being found. I mean, the polar cap stuff is very, in my opinion, I'm not going to judge it one way or another. Something I've learned to not do at this point is to make judgment on sites where I don't have really good data, and especially when I haven't been there to inspect it myself. But I want to talk about Atlantis, and it's very nice that you brought this up, because Atlantis, of course, the basic story of Atlantis we get from Plato. He got it from the Egyptians ultimately through Solon, his ancestor who had gone to Egypt in about 600 or so BC. And what is important about Atlantis from my point of view and for my research is not where was Atlantis geographically, but when did Atlantis exist? When did it exist temporally and what happened to it? And Plato is very specific and clear about this. When you take Plato's recounting of Atlantis, you put it into our modern chronology, he states very clearly that Atlantis collapses due to natural catastrophes. He literally says within a day or so it collapsed. It collapses due to natural catastrophes circa 9600 BC. This is incredibly close to the modern dating for the end of the last ice age and the dating that I have for the collapse of this earlier cycle of civilization, based on my work on the Great Sphinx, based on the site of Göbekli Tepe that we have in southeastern Turkey being excavated, or was being excavated by Klaus Schmidt, who's now deceased, of the German Archaeological Institute. So we have really good data that there was this advanced culture, or advanced cultures around the world, and civilization before the end of the last ice age. They collapsed 9700 BC, and this is absolutely in sync with what Plato was saying for Atlantis and what so many scholars have dismissed as simply nonsense and legend, or Atlantis was just a political morality story.
Yeah. Well, do you think that they had, in the past, civilizations had better technology than we do today? Maybe they surpassed us in technology?
Well, I don't know. Better is a judgment value. Okay. What I think they had was different technology than we have today. Right now, we have a problem, and technology is a big issue. And what kind of technology they had, we just really don't know. What survived from those early civilizations, and I think in particular Egypt and in Turkey, because those are the two places that we have the most evidence, my work on the Sphinx and the structures that are associated with the, I'll call it proto-Sphinx, the Sphinx from that early period. One has to realize, if you think about the Sphinx physically, the head has been recarved. The head is a dynastic head, so that doesn't go back to that early period. It's the body and the temples associated with it that do. And in Turkey, we have Göbekli Tepe, which are these magnificent, essentially stone circles or enclosures, beautifully carved. But in both cases and elsewhere, what we have are huge megalithic structures that survived the catastrophe at the end of the last ice age. We don't have other aspects of their material culture, things that wouldn't survive. If you think about our culture today, what is going to survive 12,000 years? And especially if we have a major catastrophe, the catastrophe at the end of the last ice age, as I pieced together the evidence, was a major solar outburst, which literally incinerated things in some cases, caused incredible havoc on the surface of the Earth, set fires, wildfires, high radiation levels. It caused mass extinctions of large mammals. There was earthquake activity that was accelerated, volcanic activity, torrential rains from melting glaciers virtually instantaneously, putting all this atmosphere, putting all this moisture into the atmosphere, which then rained down again as torrential rains, rising sea levels. So it was really incredible chaos and havoc. And a lot of material culture will not survive that. A lot of our materials culture would not survive that.
Sure.
So we don't have a good handle on exactly what technologies they had. We do know, or we can extrapolate, they were moving really huge stone blocks that weighed tens of tons, in some cases 100 tons or more. How did they do this? Wow. We can't do a lot of this with our modern technology. I've spoken to many people with, big cranes and that type of thing, and they are just astounded at what they were doing. So they had some kind of technology that we're not aware
Dr.
of.
Schoch, if you had 1 million slaves, and I'm just throwing a number out there.
No, it doesn't work. I can tell you why. Because when you look at some of these buildings, a good example is what's known as the Sphinx Temple, which is contemporaneous with the oldest portions of the Sphinx. You have blocks that weigh 50 tons, maybe approaching 100 tons, very close tolerances between them, very small space to move around in. You can't have 1 million slaves. You can't even have 100.
Because that was the answer that was always given to me, was the workforce they had.
I'm sorry?
The workforce is, every time I brought this up to other academics, when we were talking about this, that weren't of like minds like us, they would cite that they had such a vast amount of slave power to
see, the problem is,
on.
and I know a lot of PhDs who are pretty, how should I say, I don't think they can always think straight, because they have so many vested interests in their own paradigm, their own worldview, and what they have staked their careers on. But I've heard all those arguments, and I've talked to these people. Some of them are my colleagues. But that doesn't mean I agree with them. What I'm saying is, you can have all the slaves in the world, but if you can't fit them into the narrow confines of the space to move these blocks around, where are they going to do? They're just going to stand on the periphery gawking.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, because too many hands is sometimes bad.
How do you think? How do you think they were able to do it? What is the technology?
Huge blocks within very small enclosures, and you can't get the people in there to be trying to do it.
Well, yeah, Eric brought up a good point. Then how, in your opinion, how did they do it?
Oh, I don't know. That's another question.
That's the $64,000 question.
I suspect that we are in a situation where it's very difficult to think really far outside the box without, going into, I don't know, I want to say total lunacy, but in fact, things might not be so lunatic. It's very difficult. I get very frustrated with some of my colleagues, both in and out of academia, both in and out of conventional thinking, where they're always putting things within the framework of the technologies that we know, we use, that we're aware of. I suspect ultimately that some of these very early civilizations were using technologies that are completely lost, excuse me, and that we're just not aware of. They're so vastly different from what we're used to that we can't imagine them at the moment. And we might someday discover them and say, oh, that makes so much sense. But until you make that discovery.
Yeah, I would agree. And the thing of it is,
I don't think it's just a bunch of ramps and levers and slaves and, that type of thing.
Yes. I'd love to, Dr. Schoch, just for our listeners' sake, those who are kind of entering this midway in terms of their knowledge of what we're talking about, I'd love to hear just a little bit of background on how did you come to the conclusion that the Sphinx is so much older than it's thought to be? What was the actual data that you based that on? And then I know you've used that similar techniques to date other really important archaeological sites as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I began with my work on the Great Sphinx. I first went to Egypt in 1990, and that was at the invitation of John Anthony West, who is a sort of rogue independent Egyptologist. And he had read works on, if this is important to anyone, Schwaar de Lubitsch, who is long deceased. He died in 1961. But to give credit where credit is due, Schwaar de Lubitsch had suggested in just one line of one of his books that the Sphinx was eroded differently than anything else on the Giza Plateau. The Giza Plateau is where the Sphinx is located, along with the Great Pyramid, Second Pyramid, Third Pyramid. So I went to Egypt in 1990 as a geologist. Again, my PhD is geology and geophysics, and I went there specifically to look at the Sphinx from a geological point of view. And to make a very long story much shorter, one of the first things I noticed on site within minutes, less than 2 minutes, when I got there, is that the erosion on the body of the Sphinx, the weathering and the erosion on the body of the Sphinx and the walls of what are known as the Sphinx enclosure, because the body of the Sphinx sits down below bedrock level. They had to carve down into the bedrock to carve the body of the Sphinx. So it actually sits in what's known as the enclosure, or sometimes they call it less formally the Sphinx ditch. This has walls on it. They are heavily weathered and eroded, as is the body of the Sphinx. The weathering and erosion is not desert erosion. The Sphinx sits on the edge of the Sahara Desert. It's been a desert for 5,000 years. We know this geologically. Yet on the body of the Sphinx, on the walls of the Sphinx enclosure, there is plenty of evidence for rainfall, precipitation, rain erosion, we can call it, erosion caused by water cascading down the walls, by water from rain beating down on it. It gives a different type of erosion and weathering, gives a different profile, sort of a rounded profile, very different than desert and wind erosion. So this was incompatible. This is incompatible with the climatic conditions of the last 5,000 years. The only logical conclusion for me as a geologist is that these walls and the body of the Sphinx went back, that it goes back to a much earlier period before the Sahara Desert set in, well into a much more remote period.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask.
Before dynastic Egyptians. So that was the initial observation. And you have these deep fissures, for instance, that can only be caused by water separating, opening up, weak spots in the rock. I mean, there's just lots of diagnostic features that show it goes back to an earlier climatic regime. So that was the first evidence.
Now, any evidence of flooding?
Well, see, flooding is a colloquial term, and there are different types of flooding, but usually what people think of when they ask me that is, could it be flooding from the Nile, from rising water? And I've even seen pictures in popular books that play on my work, and they have the Sphinx buried up to its neck in water, rising floods. No, that is not what we have here. Okay. If you had that, you would have a different type of erosional feature. You would have essentially what's known as wave cutting, undercutting of the softer layers. No, this was from rainfall coming from above and washing down over the walls of the enclosure, down the back of the Sphinx. It's from not flooding, but essentially water collecting on the Giza Plateau, and then sort of like a waterfall, if you want to say it that, although that's not a good image because it wasn't that quick, but cascading down from above. And the evidence shows quite directly that that's what was happening. It wasn't Nile flooding or flooding coming up from below.
So where do they currently, the popular theory, how old is the Sphinx?
The current theory, so let me continue with that. The current Egyptological dogma is that the Sphinx dates back to 2500 BC. So 2500 BC, or 4,500 years ago, to the reign of Khafra, also known as Chephren, and he is the reputed builder of the second pyramid. The Sphinx sits due east of the second pyramid. And so the Egyptologists say, he built the pyramid, the second pyramid. He built the Sphinx in front of it to guard it or whatever. They even say that the face of the Sphinx is the face of Khafra, which to me it doesn't matter whether it is or is not, because the face is recarved. It's not the original face, although we got a forensic expert from the New York Police Department, the late Frank Domingo, to analyze the face of the Sphinx and analyze the face of the pharaoh Khafra, and they're not the same face anyway. So that argument is bogus.
I remember when I was a kid, they used to tell me that Napoleon blew the Sphinx's nose off.
Yeah, that's nonsense too. It's actually fairly well documented that it was taken off by probably he was Sufi, but a fanatic hundreds of years before Napoleon. Napoleon probably would have had someone shot if they'd been damaging the Sphinx, because Napoleon was really into the antiquities in Egypt. Well, but to get back to your question, standard dogma is 2500 BC. Based on all the evidence I've now put together, I have, and we haven't gone into all that evidence yet, the Sphinx goes back to an earlier climatic regime, to a much earlier period. We also did seismic work around the Sphinx that you can look at subsurface weathering features. You can calibrate that. We also found a chamber under the paw of the Sphinx, which had been predicted by Edgar Cayce, which is sort of bizarre. But when you put all the data together, the Sphinx, as far as I'm concerned, the oldest portions actually go back to about 10,000 BC to the end of the last ice age, and they are part of this earlier cycle of civilization I was talking about.
Very, very good stuff. We got to run a break. We come back. More Dr. Robert Schoch. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get into the ancient alien theory, too, at some point. Don't worry about that. We'll be right back right after this. Hey, you're listening to After Hours AM, and if you're listening to us via podcast, make sure you like us, follow us, review us, tell your friends about us, tell grandma about us, and keep listening.
It's your ideas, work, and creativity that make it your yard. At ACE, we're here to help with hoses and sprinklers to nurture growth, gardening tools for the shape of good things to come, even the right fertilizer and bug killers to make the grass a little greener. You'll find it all now at ACE, your place, with everything you need for your yard, plus helpful advice, almost like we're right there. ACE,
the helpful place.
Anavar Media LCC is a dedicated team of professionals committed to helping business development scale and protect their websites, mobile applications, enterprise software solutions in the Northeast Ohio area. Locally owned since 2012, our client-centered values truly sets Anavar apart. Contact us today to learn how you can get 25% off your first project. Call them at 234-380-4852. Again, that's 234-380-4852, or visit them at www.anavar.com. Again, that's www.anavar.com.
Are you hungry? Hungry as a gremlin? Here's gremlin cereal.
Gremlins, gremlins, bite after bite. What a tasty way to satisfy a gremlin appetite.
Gremlins is a deliciously sweet, crunchy cereal that satisfies the hungry little gremlin that's in all of us.
Gremlins, gremlins, bite after bite. What a tasty way to satisfy a gremlin appetite.
Gremlin cereal is part of this complete breakfast.
Gremlin, yum yum.
Hey everybody, this is Joel Sturgis, and did you know that After Hours AM and America's Most Haunted have a great new website out there? You're going to want to visit America's-Most-Haunted.com. There you can get all the new content from all the writers for America's Most Haunted, as well as the great haunted headlines everybody loves each and every week, as well as catch After Hours AM live right there, along with podcasts, past shows, and get to know your hosts, as well as contact us all in one stop. You're going to love it. You're not going to want to go anywhere else. So come to America's-Most-Haunted.com today. You're listening to After Hours AM. Do you have a question for the guests or even the host? That's really easy. Go ahead and email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Are you feeling like picking up the phone and being part of the show? Call us at 612-326-6874, 612-326-6874. Come be part of the madness. Welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me,
Eric Olsen.
And we are, of course, talking tonight with Dr. Robert Schoch, and we are just talking about the Sphinx and the age of the Sphinx, and that there's water erosion on the Sphinx that has been heavily debated. And, of course, the age as well has been heavily debated. But it's very, very cool. Now, I'd like you to finish your thought. Now, the Sphinx is older than, you put it older than anyone else does. And, of course, we were speaking during the break that, I was told all along by a lot of people in academia that very well could be wind erosion. I don't have a trained eye, and I'm glad that you were able to clear that up.
Yeah, a lot of people, if you don't have a trained eye or you're not trained to look at things or you don't understand the distinctions, it's easy to, it's obviously easy to miss evidence. But as I was saying to you over the break, I took a group to Egypt, and I do that periodically, but in this case I was filling in for someone else. I took a group, I had them there, and within an hour or less, actually, most all of them could tell wind erosion from water erosion, wind weathering from water weathering. It's very easy to see. And when you're on the Giza Plateau, you start to realize, once you can tell them apart, that you only see the water weathering and erosion on the Sphinx, on the body of the Sphinx, and the temples associated with it, which were carved when the body of the Sphinx was carved. Okay. In fact, we know that when they carved the body of the Sphinx, they took out humongous limestone blocks and they reassembled these blocks as the temples that sit in front and just to the south of the Sphinx, known as the Sphinx Temple and Valley Temples. So these are just as old as the Sphinx themselves. They're megalithic constructions. When I first got into this business, I was lambasted by my fellow academics. They said, people back then were hunters and gatherers, 10, 12,000 years ago. They couldn't build megalithic structures. They didn't have organized labor or social structures to support such technologies or, building. One of my critics said they didn't build cities, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I've been basing my work on physical evidence. The geologists have agreed with me all along when I present at geological meetings. And since then, we have found at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey another well-dated site going back 10,000 BC, where we have likewise huge megalithic structures, stone structures of incredible sophistication from this same earlier date. So, as many people now are saying to me, I've been vindicated that yes, there's independent evidence developed, in this case by the German Archaeological Institute, which is impeccable, that there was this earlier cycle of civilization.
What do we know about them? That I'm really curious.
They're sophisticated, but what we really know about them, and I want to make an important point here, is that they were devastated, and I mentioned this before the break, by the cataclysms, by the chaos, by the natural events at the end of the last ice age. And I think it's important to at least mention what happened. There was a major solar outburst which caused huge climatic changes. It would have included what we now call major solar flares, solar particle event, or sometimes they call it a proton event. It would have included what are known as coronal mass ejections. There probably would have been various electronic pulses with it. It would have messed up the magnetosphere, destroyed the ozone layer, et cetera, et cetera. The thing about it is this happened about 12,000 years ago, just under 12,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age, caused all this chaos and climatic changes. This decimated that early cycle of civilization. The sun is a star. People sometimes don't realize that somehow, but it is a star. It's a fairly typical star for its class. stars are not stable all the time. They go through long-term cycles. They go through periods of higher volatility, lower volatility. They go through periods sometimes when they're relatively unstable. This was the case at the end of the last ice age. Since then, the sun sort of calmed down, was relatively stable for over 8,000 years, 9,000, 10,000 years or more. And this has been noted in major astrophysical journals, etc. In recent times, in the last 2 centuries, especially the last 50 or 70 years, our sun has started to become unstable again. It's started to become more volatile again. It's going through periods of almost a shutdown versus other times it becomes active again. This is exactly what we saw at the end of the last ice age based on isotope studies. At that time, it brought down that round of civilization. Here we are in our hubris. We have this incredible technologically sophisticated civilization, but what is it based on? It's based on electronics. It's based on electricity. We are so vulnerable to the next solar outburst, which literally, and I don't want to be a doomsayer, but I'm being realistic from a geological point of view, it could happen at any time. And if it does, when it does, we are going to be devastated just like those earlier civilizations. So to me, I've never considered myself a Egyptophile or someone who just loves studying ancient civilizations for their own sake. Yes, they're very interesting, but I think there are a lot of lessons. There are a lot of things we can learn from studying earlier civilizations.
I definitely agree.
We need to apply them to the present day.
Yeah, I definitely. I was curious of where you fall with the whole ancient alien thinking. Do you believe that they had a hand, the Egyptians, building the pyramids and getting the tolerances, as we talked about earlier, so precise? Do you think that there was a hand from interstellar travelers?
No, I don't. I am honestly, even though I've been on Ancient Aliens, the History Channel show, and that type of thing, I've always been careful to say, Ancient Aliens are, it's easy to just pull out of the woodwork, oh, it was Ancient Aliens, if you don't have an explanation otherwise. I don't think we need to go there at this time. I don't see any really good, strong evidence for Ancient Aliens or alien intervention.
Maybe we're not just.
There's still a lot that we don't know.
Well, I was going to say maybe we're not giving our own species enough credit.
Exactly, exactly. Because I think what we see the end of this earlier cycle of civilization. We see it decimated nearly 12,000 years ago. But what came before that? And were there cycles of civilization even before that? This is something I'll be talking about specifically during Contact in the Desert next month.
I was just about to bring that up. Tell us a little bit about Contact in the Desert.
Yeah, Contact in the Desert is an incredible forum. There's going to be so many different people there, but I will be there specifically to talk about ancient history, ancient civilization, our origins, and some of these, what for my fellow academics are really radical, paradigm-shattering theories. And I'll be discussing these both in a general open lecture, and I think they call it a workshop, and an intensive. So there'll be different levels where I can interact with anyone who wants to come. We can discuss these things firsthand. I'll be giving presentations, PowerPoint lectures and that type of thing with lots of incredible photographs, all of which my wife, Katie, and I took ourselves. So we'll really be getting deep into this and all of the implications. And some of the implications are not just that radically changes our concept of ancient history, but that we need to look at what the ancients were doing. We need to see what we can learn from them, both in a positive sense of what they have to teach us and also what happened to them that we might want to avoid.
Well, yeah, exactly. What wiped them out, maybe we can avoid history repeating itself.
Good job now, because every minute, literally, I don't want to exaggerate, but every minute there's another, not every minute, every fraction of a second, there's another more sophisticated smartphone or another satellite going up, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these are so vulnerable to solar fluctuations, much less a solar outburst. So we're putting ourselves into a really, really tight place where in 1859, I have to mention this, in 1859, because sometimes people think, this is just crazy nonsense. No, 1859, there was what was known as the Carrington event. It was a very minor solar outburst from an astrophysical point of view, but it hit Earth, what's known as a coronal mass ejection, actually two of them in a row, hit Earth in 1859, messed up the magnetosphere, caused what people call the aurora borealis, aurora australis, the northern and southern lights. People saw things like that around the world in the sky, which is actually very scary for them. But it put all kinds of electrical charges into the atmosphere. In 1859, the only real applied electrical machinery that was being used was the telegraph. There were telegraph lines, and those were used by, the wealthy, that type of thing. Those telegraph lines acted as huge antenna. It actually burnt down telegraph stations. The whole thing was destroyed. But it didn't cause much effect for the average person because, the average person wasn't using the telegraph, and even the richer were using the telegraph. Okay, so they did get their stock market information as quickly as they might have, but it didn't cause any real serious harm. You get what I'm saying?
But now, it would be
with
another
our grid
story.
systems, with our communication systems, with the satellites, which would be the first to go. But think about all the power lines, whether they're above ground power lines or below ground power lines, they would go the way the telegraph systems would go. It would knock out our electrical grid system. It would blow out all the transformers, which can't be replaced except in a time frame of numerous years. But you have to have electricity to make new high voltage transformers. It would knock everything out. It has been estimated, and by groups like the National Academy of Sciences, that type of thing, NASA even, they've done some work on this, and we could have from an 1859 level Carrington event, if that happened tomorrow or the next day or next year, literally billions of people in the developed world could die. I mean, this is not an over-exaggeration because without electricity, think what would happen.
Well, yeah, because back in those days, we were
Aboriginals in Australia or Stone Age tribes in Amazon. They might not notice anything happened, but the developed world will go down.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because
it'd be The Walking Dead. I mean, we're talking post-apocalyptic world. Can anything be done about this?
You have people. A lot of times they don't realize how dependent we are on such things. There'll be no water. Without electricity. You don't have water supplies functioning. If you live in any kind of building in a city, a high-rise, that type of thing, you can't get up and down. You can't pump gas. Most of our records are now electronic. Most money and monetary systems, it's just little bits and computers. Those all go down. But a really scary thing is, how do we generate electricity? Much of our electricity to this day around the world is from nuclear power plants. So you've got 400 or more nuclear power plants around the world. With the grid going down without electricity feeding into them, they can't properly cool themselves, etc. You'll have Fukushimas left and right spewing radiation.
Wow. I mean, it truly would be the end.
That's all bad, and it's making my head hurt. I have another question. I would love to hear.
Not one of these people that I'm not a prepper. I'm not trying to say the world is going to collapse. I'm just saying realistically.
Yeah.
There would be major issues. Basically, civilization would fall apart. It really would be The Walking Dead.
And I mean, how stupid can you be to ignore the fact that we had in 1859 an event of this level? It's just that at that point in 1859, in the mid-19th century, we weren't at the level of sophistication we are now. But all the evidence points to the end of the last ice age. We had an event or a series of events that were orders of magnitude greater than the 1859 Carrington event, and we have evidence that the sun is going back into that cycle, that aspect of its cycle that it was in at the end of the last ice age. The 1859 Carrington event could simply be the first little hiccup before the sun really explodes.
That would super suck. Here is my question, because my brain hurts.
I'm being very negative now, but I think we need to open this dialogue and start talking about it.
What I want to know, you're 100% right. It is very frightening. You've heard about it in these things being possible and actually feasible, and so they need to be planned for in other contexts. But I agree with you. I think the solar issue, the solar flare, the sunspot type, all of that, I think that is by far, there's the asteroid possibility, so on and so forth, some sort of virus. But I think you're right. I think it's the solar flare or solar activity that is is our greatest danger. My question, though, I'd love to hear just a little bit about. I know you're going to talk about this at Contact in the Desert, and we should remind everyone that Contact in the Desert is coming up May 19th through the 21st. It's in Joshua Tree, California, and you can get all the information you need at contactinthedesert.com, including the list of literally dozens. It looks like about 3 dozen of the top names in the field across the spectrum, everything from Dr. Schoch, who is a serious scientist and who is offering nothing in particular regarding UFOs and aliens, but who has an alternative view of civilization. So that's my question. I know you're going to talk about even earlier potential civilizations prior to this 12,000 years ago civilization. What evidence is there of those, and where did you get that evidence, and what could they be?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that ties in here is as you go back in time, and I'm talking now basic geology and paleontology, as you go back in time, understandably to most people, you have less and less evidence because it deteriorates, it gets destroyed, that type of thing, and it drops off exponentially as you go back into deep time. But we do have glimmerings that maybe there were earlier civilizations. Informally, I've started using the notation, and people will see this if they look at Contact in the Desert and look at the description of what they call the intensive on Monday. We could refer to ourselves as Civilization A, just to give it a name. Not that we're better or worse. Yeah. Civilization B would be the earlier cycle of civilization that ended with the end of the last ice age. So that's the Sphinx and Göbekli Tepe that we've been talking about. But they must have had an origin, and I suspect very strongly, based on at least glimmerings of evidence, that they had an origin, they had a demise, but before that, there would have been a civilization C and maybe even a civilization D before that. Are you following what I'm saying?
I am.
So these earlier cycles of civilization, as we go up the alphabet, using my informal terminology, as we go up the alphabet, we're going back further in time. So how far back does it go? We don't know. But for instance, a civilization C or D, there's some very strange things. For instance, in Peru, there's a site that I've visited known as Marcahuasi. that has these strange things that look like sculptures, but people argue about them because they're so deeply weathered and eroded. Could they just be natural landforms, or were they actually huge sculptures that go back to a very remote time? That's one possibility. The ancient Egyptians themselves have, quote, records. When I say the ancient Egyptians, the dynastic Egyptians talked about not just a period of about 10,000 BC in our chronology, but they also talked about that there was a civilization in Egypt, and using our modern chronology, about 36,000 or so BC. Now, is that just pure myth and craziness, or did they know something that we don't know? I start wondering if they maybe knew something, because when they were talking about 10,000 BC, again, using our chronology, they didn't use those terms. Everyone laughed at that, but now we have physical evidence for that. So maybe there's physical evidence for something even earlier. Likewise, in Bolivia, we have some tantalizing evidence that maybe things go back further. In Indonesia, in Java, on the island of Java, there's a site of Gunung Padang, some of which goes back to the end. Some of it goes back to the end of the last ice age. I've had the chance to visit that, but there's also dates that may go back a cycle, what I call a cycle earlier. When you look at Europe, a lot of things have been dismissed. Oh, it's just Paleolithic, more or less late Stone Age. Paleolithic being the early Stone Age, and then the late part of the Stone Age. And people say, oh, they were just a bunch of primitives. But when you look at some of the, quote, cave paintings, I mean, they're incredibly sophisticated. Is this maybe the proverbial tip of the iceberg of a culture, maybe even a civilization that had so much more, but it's been destroyed? There's some evidence that, in fact, they may have had some kind of notation, some kind of, if we could call it, writing, that they were using consistently.
I think that there's a lot we have left to learn. That, exactly. But, Doctor, we only have about two minutes left if you want to talk a little bit about Contact in the Desert and your website, so people can go there. And
the Desert, I hope people will come see me there and see all the speakers, and we can talk about these things in person. Also, I want to give my website.
Yeah, do that.
My
definitely.
Website is www.robertschoch.com, and my name is spelled Schoch, so it's www.robertsch, all one word, .com. And I think you might have a link to that. But www.robertschoch.com, and I have a link to Contact in the Desert, as well as links to my books and other things. And I hope to see people next month at the event.
Yeah, that's over in Joshua Tree, Joshua Tree, California over there. You're not going to want to miss that. Again, Contact in the Desert, and there could be a lot of great speakers, including yourself, Dr. Schoch, and of course, we're also going to have Eric Von Doniken over there, and he is the originator and the writer of Chariots of the Gods. You're not going to want to miss that. But man, an hour has come and gone already, Eric.
Shocking.
It is done, and
no pun intended.
No pun. And so, on behalf of myself, Joel Sturgis, of course, Mr. Eric Olsen, we'd like to thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and have a great and wonderful and safe Easter, everybody. And don't let that Easter bunny hold you, because we did see the picture on Twitter. It was quite horrifying. So until next time, everyone, again, happy Easter. Thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter.